We're going to start off section 3 with some warm-up examples. So we've got some here, and these are just looking at combining like terms and making sure that you remember how to do that. So first thing I would do anytime I have an addition or a subtraction, I would try to get rid of the parentheses first. So I would make this now. Sorry, you got to open this back up. So I would make this 2 plus 3x, so just taking off the parentheses off of this one, and then I would distribute the negative through, so negative 4 plus 2x, and then combine like terms. These two would combine together, so that would be negative 2, and then plus 5x, because then we would combine those two together. So my answer would be negative 2 plus 5x. In multiplying, I'm going to multiply them out. If you remember when we had to do this, it's kind of like a distribution, but you remember that we actually multiply them a little bit differently. So we do the FOIL method. If you remember the FOIL method, there's also the box method, and I'm going to eventually go through the box method pretty soon and let you know what that is, but we'll do FOIL first. So we have 5 times 2, which is 10, 5 times negative 2, which is negative 10x. Then we do the 3x times 2, and we do the 3x times negative 2. So I end up with these four terms here. I'm going to combine my like terms. Notice that this should not be an x here, right? Oh no, that should be an x there. Sorry, that is an x there. So I want to take this back because I forgot this. So I forgot an x squared. So let's go ahead and now look at our like terms that we have when we're multiplying them through. There are no like terms with a 10, so the 10 is going to stay the same. We have minus 10x plus 4x, which is minus 4x, and then minus 6x squared. So that would be multiplied out. So I forgot that 3x times negative 2x is 6x squared. So when we're doing this last one, we're actually doing the same step that we did above. We are going to multiply them. That should not have been an x, that should have been a plus sign. And so we're going to go ahead and multiply 2 plus 4x times 2 plus 4x, because that's what squared means. We multiply it by itself. Then we do the FOIL method. So that would be 4 plus 8x. And then we have plus 8x. And then we have plus 16x squared. And then we combine all of our like terms, so we get 4 plus 16x plus 16x squared. So that would be our final answer. Okay, so that's the warm-up. So when we start going through the warm-up, you're going to be doing some of those to make sure that you can remember how to do these types of problems, because a lot of this complex number stuff is going to be the same. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is look at our vocabulary. The vocabulary of all of these things is, number one, what this imaginary unit I is. So I is a square root of negative 1. So when we start talking about complex numbers, we want to know what is I. And I is the square root of negative 1. Of course, I can't take a square root of a negative number. So we came up with, or someone came up with, not me, I'm not that old, but someone came up with using the I variable, or I term, really it's not a variable, I equals, which is called an imaginary part, I equals the square root of negative 1. So I squared is just I times I. So if I multiply these together, I have the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. Okay, and so when we have those, if I'm multiplying I times I, at this point, that's actually going to turn out to be negative 1. Okay, so when we do that, we're going to start seeing some different values as we kind of go through there. But notice, if I'm multiplying or taking the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, that is actually just 2. So we have two 2's, we take out a 2. If I have the square root of 1,000 times the square root of 1,000, that's just 1,000, because I have two 1,000s there. Here I have two negative 1, so I take out a negative 1, so I have negative 1. So I cubed now is going to be based on I times I squared. And we know that I is square root of negative 1. And we know that I squared is negative 1. So this is just going to be negative I. And then we have this one, which is I squared times I squared. And I squared, remember, is negative 1. So we have negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1. So these are some things to remember, these four terms. And then they repeat. So like I to the 5th is the same thing as I to the 6th is the same thing as I squared, and so on. But they just kind of keep repeating as we kind of go through this. A complex number looks like this, a plus bi. So 3 plus 2i, 4 minus 5i, 0 plus 3i, 0 minus 2i. All of these are complex numbers. So notice that we have a real part and an imaginary part. That's what those really indicate in those two places. And these are some examples that we can have. And then, as I mentioned, the real part is a, that's a real number. And the pure complex number is just the bi part. So that would be that bi part that we're dealing with over there. Okay, so more terminology as we go through it. Complex conjugates, so that's going to be the next one. So for complex conjugates, if I have 3 plus 2i, its conjugate is 3 minus 2i. If I have a complex number of 4 minus 5i, its complex conjugate is 4 plus 5i. If I have a complex number that is just negative 6i, its complex conjugate is positive 6i. Notice that only the imaginary part's value changes. So even if I have negative 2 plus 2i, my complex conjugate would be negative 2 minus 2i because only the imaginary part changes. And then finally, to do something called rationalizing the denominator, we are going to have something like this. If I have 3 plus 4i divided by 2 minus 3i, I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by the complex conjugate of the denominator. Okay, so notice 2 plus 3i, the conjugate is 2 minus 3i, the complex conjugate is 2 plus 3i, so we multiply the top and bottom by 2 plus 3i. And now notice that we have these multiplications here. So I'm going to get a complex number up here. I'm going to get something, a plus bi up here. But in the denominator, if you notice what happens, if I actually FOIL, so 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3i is 6i, negative 3 times 2 is negative 6i, and then negative 3 times negative 3 is negative 9i squared. And so the top number is still going to be just whatever a plus bi, so that's multiplied out. I'm not going to do that multiplication. Notice that the I term cancels, so we get 4 minus 9i squared. And then what's even more important is a plus bi, whatever's on top stays the same, and we get 4 plus 9. Now, why do I get 4 plus 9? Because if you recall, I squared is equal to negative 1. So since I squared is equal to negative 1, we really have negative 9 here. This really kind of comes down to negative 9 times negative 1, which is, of course, positive 9. So we just get a plus bi, whatever that comes out to be, over 13. But when we talk about rationalizing the denominator, what we're doing is we're getting rid of the I term in the denominator, not the numerator, but in the denominator. And of course, in the numerator, when we multiply these two out, we're still going to have an I term when we do that. So that's the terms and the definitions that you need to know. And we'll move on to some problems next.